What if I told you that in Canada, having $1 million in the bank still doesn't put you anywhere near the top 1%? Not even close. In fact, according to the latest data, you'd need roughly 10 times that just to crack the very top tier of Canadian wealth. And the gap between what most people think is rich and what actually qualifies as rich in this country might genuinely shock you. So by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where you stand. Whether you're just outside the top 10%, sitting inside the top 5%, or nowhere close to that elusive top 1%. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're breaking down real data to answer one question that a lot of Canadians quietly wonder about. How much money do you actually need to be considered rich in this country? Not rich based on lifestyle or social media, but rich based on hard numbers, specifically net worth. That means everything you own, your home, your investments, your RRSPs and TFSAs, your business equity, minus everything you owe, like your mortgage and any other debt. Before we dive into the numbers, it's worth understanding where this data comes from. Statistics Canada regularly surveys household finances, and more recently, the Parliamentary Budget Officer released a detailed report tracking exactly how wealth is distributed across Canadian families. So what you're about to hear isn't a guess. It's based on real government financial data. Let's start at the very top and work our way down. To be in Canada's top 1% by individual net worth, you need approximately $10 million. That number tends to surprise people, because a lot of Canadians assume $1 million or $2 puts you in elite territory. It doesn't. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, families in the top 1% held a minimum net wealth of around $7.4 million back in 2023, and that number has already climbed past $7.5 million more recently. Collectively, this group, roughly 170,000 families across the entire country, controls close to a quarter of all the wealth in Canada. Let that sink in for a second. Less than 2% of families hold nearly 25% of everything. What does this group actually look like? It's not just tech founders and celebrities. A huge portion are business owners, senior executives, specialist physicians, and long-term investors who've spent decades compounding wealth through real estate, private businesses, and diversified stock portfolios. Very few people land in this bracket through salary alone. Almost all of them have multiple income streams working simultaneously: business ownership, rental properties, and serious investment portfolios that have been growing for 20 or 30 years. One step down from the very top, the top 5% threshold sits at just over $1 million in individual net worth. This is a massive drop compared to the top 1%. And that tells you something important. Wealth doesn't grow evenly across percentiles. Once you cross into the top few percent, the wealth curve gets dramatically steeper. The distance between the top 5% and the top 1% is nearly 10 times larger than the distance between the top 10% and the top 5%. In other words, the closer you get to the very top, the more explosive the gap becomes. Now here's the number a lot of you are probably most curious about: the top 10% threshold. To be in the top 10% of Canadians by net worth, you need roughly $865,000. For a lot of Canadians, especially homeowners in cities like Toronto or Vancouver who paid down a significant chunk of their mortgage, this number is genuinely within reach, particularly by your late 40s or 50s. If you own a home with strong equity, have a healthy RRSP or pension, and maybe some additional investments on the side, you could already be closer to this threshold than you'd expect. It's worth pointing out just how concentrated wealth is at the top of this country's economy. The Parliamentary Budget Officer's data shows the wealthiest 10% of families hold roughly 53% of all net wealth in Canada. The top 20% hold close to 70%. Meanwhile, the bottom 40% of families collectively hold only around 3%. That's not a small gap, that's an entirely different financial universe. So why is wealth so concentrated at the top in Canada specifically? Real estate plays a massive role. Homeowners in major cities have watched their property values climb dramatically over the past 2 decades, building enormous equity, especially for anyone who bought early. On top of that, tax-advantaged accounts like RRSPs and TFSAs allow long-term investors to compound wealth without the drag of annual taxation, which matters enormously over a 20 or 30-year timeline. And then, there's business ownership. A huge share of Canada's wealthiest families built their fortunes through private businesses rather than public company salaries. Now let's talk about income for a second, because it's a different measurement, and it matters too. To be in the top 1% of individual income earners in Canada, you need to earn somewhere between $250,000 and $315,000 a year depending on which dataset you're looking at. The top 5% income threshold sits around $162,000 annually, and the top 10% starts at roughly $126,000. But here's the catch. High income absolutely does not guarantee high net worth. Plenty of high earners spend aggressively and build minimal wealth over time, while more modest earners, who save consistently and invest early, often end up wealthier by retirement. Income is simply the tool. Net worth is the actual scoreboard that matters. If there's one consistent pattern across all of this data, it's that the wealthiest Canadians rarely rely on a single source of wealth. They're not just earning a big salary and saving it. They're combining real estate equity, tax-sheltered investment accounts, business ownership, and diversified portfolios, letting all of those pieces compound together over 15, 20, even 30 years. Nobody builds this kind of wealth from one lucky break. It comes from consistent, unglamorous decisions repeated for decades, paying down debt instead of carrying it, maxing out tax-advantaged accounts instead of leaving them empty, and staying invested through market ups and downs instead of panic selling. So there you have it, the real numbers behind wealth in Canada. Roughly $865,000 gets you into the top 10%. Just over $1 million puts you in the top 5%. And around $10 million is what it actually takes to reach that true top 1%. Wherever you currently sit on this scale, the path forward looks remarkably similar for almost everyone. Pay down debt, maximize your tax-advantaged accounts, and stay consistently invested for the long haul. Now I want to hear from you. Where do you think you currently sit on this scale? And where do you want to be in 10 years? Drop your answer in the comments below. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what wealth actually looks like in this country, hit that like button, subscribe for more breakdowns like this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.